Alright, hey, I'm Ryan. I'm one of the tutorees in the Economics Tutoring Center. As a reminder, our teaching methods may vary between professors, so always confirm the language with your professor. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the marginal rate of substitution. The marginal rate of substitution is just the slope of an indifference curve. And the marginal rate of substitution can be calculated using this formula here, which I'll explain in a second. Okay, so we're going to continue our discussion about the marginal rate of substitution. Sometimes it's called the MRS. Fit it on here. Nice. Okay, so remember that if we have two goods, x and y, we might have some utility function, utility of x and y, and we can fix a particular level of this utility function and plot it in y and x and get an indifference curve that might look something like this. Now, as we know from any two-dimensional curve, we're going to have the slope of this line is just going to be the change in y divided by the change in x. Or with the derivative, it's going to be dy dx. In this case, it's actually going to be negative because this will always be downward sloping. So I'm going to give you a quick intro as to how we derived the equation I showed you earlier based on this. So when we have a function of two variables like this, we can take the derivative of it using something called the chain rule from calculus. So the way we do that is we're going to take the derivative of utility with respect to x times the derivative on the inside, which is going to be dx, plus the same thing for y, derivative of utility with respect to y times dy. And because we want this change to be 0 because we're along an indifference curve, which means the utility value isn't changing, we want to set this equal to 0. Okay, so now we can move the y term to the right. I'm going to get du dx equals negative du, well, this would be partial u partial y times dy. Now I can divide the dx from both sides and divide the du dy, and I'm going to get du dx divided by du dy is equal to negative dy over dx, which, like we said earlier, is the slope of this indifference curve. So if we're given a utility function, you say utility of xy equals x times y, we can find the marginal rate of substitution by taking partial u with respect to x divided by partial u with respect to y. Alright, now using this formula, we can use an example, or do an example here real quick. So remember, the marginal rate of substitution, as we just found out, was derivative of utility with respect to x divided by the derivative of utility with respect to y. And now let's say we have this utility function uxy is equal to x to the 1/2 times y to the 1/2. Now remember, we can take the derivative of utility with respect to x is going to equal, remember we treat y just like it's a constant, so we use the power rule and we move this 1/2 in front, and then we're going to have x, now subtract 1 from the power, negative 1/2 times y to the 1/2, because that's just a constant, so we're going to leave it there, and then derivative of utility with respect to y, something similar here, it'll be 1/2. Now we leave the x alone because we treat that as constant, and then have y to the negative 1/2. Now we can simplify this a little bit, and when we take du dx divided by du dy, we get, let's see here, we're going to have a 1/2 x to the negative 1/2 y to the 1/2 divided by 1/2 x to the 1/2 y to the negative 1/2. We'll see that these 1/2s will cancel out. Because this power is negative, we can move it to the bottom, and this one's negative, so we can move it to the top. So we're going to get the MRS is equal to just y over x. Alright, hopefully that teaches you something about the marginal rate of substitution. You'll see why it comes in handy a little bit later in some of the other videos.